todo alborotado, volver, muy camino, la locura, aunque todo me tortura, sé que nos dejamos hace tiempo, pero llegó el momento de perder. Tú tenías mucha razón, la casual corazón, y me muero por volver. Y volver a tus brazos otra vez. All right, that's Salvador and Reggie. We were talking a little bit earlier today. We've got some of that interview deeper into the broadcast. We're going to run about an hour and a half. That seems to be what these things have been running. Feeling pretty harried, as maybe a little bit more than usual with this work, because I was just like, man, I want to have Earth Day. They don't get Earth Day too, you know. Those of you who have been with us for a while, you kind of understand what the intentionality behind the deceleration broadcast has been, which is, you know, no surrender, basically. That we're abiding by physical distancing and rejecting social distance, because we know that this is the time, right? In these moments, these lockdown times, are when the powers that be will make every grab they can to roll back our, in this case, a living planet. And we've been seeing that over these last few years here in the U.S. and in many other places, unfortunately. I'm thinking a lot about Bolsonaro in Brazil, and essentially what is an open war on indigenous people there. I had some little clips to share. I usually try to have some updates here at the top of the broadcast. But I'm just thinking, you know, that we're in a moment, and kind of how offensive the moment is, where it takes the entire global economy to collapse for the air in so many places to be breathable. Right? It takes all of us, you know, like the shutting off these engines of production and going indoors to see, you know, the forests begin to exhale and stretch out again. And it's not that we can't have one or the other. It's not like we have to destroy everything, like scorched earth, you know, like capitalism, to be able to have a good life, to have a good living. And we understand that. And the people that I organize with and talk to, and we talk to on this show twice a week now for the last like 2 to 3 weeks. It's been a while, right? But a big part of this gathering, you know, that we're trying to just hold the door open a little bit for folks to come out and be together in San Antonio, in the bioregion that we're working within and beyond, right? We're creating new online forums, new online spaces where we can be together, because it's these relationships that that we refuse to let go of, and these deeply woven relationships between each other and between all life on the planet. And so that's why I was like, yeah, it's just another day, cool, but I couldn't just let go. So we've got a number of really amazing folks that we've been talking to, interviews with Brendan Gibbons, who's been a long time environmental journalist in San Antonio, and I really wanted to kind of give him space to talk about his work and where he's from, and what he's looking forward to. Obviously, we've heard and we know Piñata protest, Alvaro del Norte and Reggie are here, and we've got Marisol, my partner, my co-editor, my life, is here, talking words for birds, words with birds. It makes sense in the end, as well as a colleague of mine, Becca Hinojosa, who's doing incredible work organizing down in the valley at the center of so many different kind of intersecting and colliding streams of I hate to call it just resistance work, but healing work, where we have this the border, and the blood that U.S. policy has put down on the border, and that um, as well as the Gulf Coast and the export terminals and LNG, that these pipelines that are just strangling the planet, the land, the people, all of it, all is one, right? So anyway, they're all with me, and I can roll really quick to give a sense of who we are here in just a second. But let me throw up just even faster than that. Some resources. I know a lot of folks have access to this in different spaces and in other media. Not everybody does. And so I offer this with the encouragement, please, right now with family violence, be aware, be listening and looking for your neighbors. Young kids are vulnerable right now. They're locked up. People are losing their work. They're losing their income. They're having a hard time finding food, and tempers are going off, and people are being hurt in those spaces. Men and women, but primarily women and young kids. LGBTQ youth are more of a target. So just be aware, be watching, be looking out for one another. Here's basically, if you've got concerns, there's a screening tool if you think you need to get tested for COVID-19. The city's got a tool set up, so you're going to need to do that first, kind of like pass that litmus test, because we are still very limited, right? And for a lot of different reasons. There's a question line, assistance line, and opportunities for Meals on Wheels and blood and all that, to donate and do this, and to give too. So if you're able to give, the comments are here. Please use that space and know that you are welcome here with us. Hey, Pat. And I hope that you'll use these comments to share. If you have a need, if you have something you want to offer, it's there, right there. And don't feel shy at all. Know that you're talking with folks who have gone through and live with their own, mad pride, right? Bipolar, panic, and depression, all that stuff, suicidal thoughts. That's, been there, done that, and we know that the shame that the culture builds upon that is what keeps us in prison and keeps us vulnerable, and is why people are still dying, because we're not able to talk together and to raise our hand when we're just lonely. We want a texting buddy, right? It could be anything. So use these resources. Really excited. Here are a few of our guests.
If you believe this climate change stuff, that means you're pro-abortion and you love smoking
Right.
weed, and it's just to associate it with all this stuff that doesn't really have anything to do with it.
Right.
That's the focus of the disinformation campaign now.
We're on the front lines of border militarization.
All right. No, that's not covert interviews. That just dropped out the visual on that for some reason. But that was Brandon Gibbons. That was Becca Hinosa. We're going to move over into that space. I did want to offer a couple of things first, and just like as we recognize, 50 years since the first Earth Day. I think back not very long ago, just a couple of years ago, maybe our son, who's 12 now, we were watching, I guess it was with his mom, the YMCA video, Village People, and it's New York City. It must have been like around the time of the first Earth Day, and they were just like looking at this. Their face kind of crinkled, and eventually asked, what's wrong with that city, right? Everything is just, it's what I remember growing up. Cities just look this way, and this was pre the return, white flight reverse, and gentrification, and all this stuff where the glass was polished up in a lot of these central spaces. Back then, it was rough. It was rough living in downtowns. So it was pretty funny, but in some ways, like these reforms, Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act, cafe fuel standards, Toxic Substances Control Act, all this stuff that just started rolling out in 1970 because of massive organizing in the United States, has done a lot. But I mean, what we weren't looking at, and much has been outsourced, and we also weren't looking at and planning for and thinking about and working on the climate change, global warming, and all the rest. So we're obviously deep into that and moving quickly in the wrong direction. But I do want to recognize, and kind of a tip of the hat, who was it? Houston, that just rolled out their Climate plan. I've got something open here. Yeah, absolutely. That's what it was. Houston. Um, Down here. So they are looking at this right now, and Dallas is soon to come. I think they're voting next month in Dallas, and just hey, welcome, catching up with San Antonio. That's great. The In addition, there's a couple items I wanted to throw up there. This is one there. I think they're still looking into two items for those of you who work with other organizations that want to come into alignment with some other global movements. There's this global charter for rewilding the earth, and I had some notes here. I'm going to put these into the comments in a little bit, but this is harkens, like for me, it's a kind of a throwback to. God, man, 10 years ago or so in Merida, Yucatan in Mexico, and the Wilderness Congress recognized that the planet, to survive and begin to heal itself and to sustain us and the rest of the life on Earth, needed at least half of the waters and half of the lands of the planet protected and to remain wild or be rewilded. So that's a campaign that just caught my eye recently, just this week when I was thinking about this call. That and E.O. Wilson, some of y'all know, he said he's written a book that, like Half Earth, I think it is, the world needs half. So that's out there. There's a couple other broadcasts tonight that we're going to be teasing. The Condor and the Eagle documentary is screening tonight at 8 o'clock Central, and we're going to put up a link on that deeper into the broadcast. But first, I just want to see what's up. I think that's Brendan up. So I'm going to roll over here, and Brendan's been here in San Antonio. Like I said, he's been doing this for a while, and there's a lot of stories that either wouldn't have come to light or we wouldn't have known about as quickly in terms of like pipeline plans over the aquifer and the like if he weren't here writing. So I just want to kick this off and welcome him into the space, and I hope you enjoy. I think one of the first questions that I have, and I wonder this a lot when I follow the work of different reporters and journalists, as I do yours in this area, is what inspired you to specialize. I know folks sometimes end up in it. I've seen folks, a reporter just doesn't show up for work one day, and someone steps in and gets that story. Kind of happened to me. And then others who are just from an early age impressed upon certain events, kind of like kicked them that way from the very beginning. But what obviously you've been doing this for a long time. Maybe share with folks how long or where you came into environmental journalism and what's kept you rooted.
Thanks for asking that. I do like to talk about why somebody would want to do climate journalism. It's not a popular beat. I grew up in western Colorado in a pretty small, isolated city called Grand Junction, surrounded by public lands. Really loved. That was kind of like all there was to do. It was sort of like the arena of my childhood, bonding with friends and with my family. But the thing my parents loved to do more than anything else is to go like hiking or skiing or mountain biking out in the wilderness there. But when I was in high school, in sort of the mid 2000s, the fracking boom was like coming to my area, and there's a lot of shale gas and oil pretty close to Grand Junction, and it was a big oil and gas town. I met a lot of Texans out there who'd moved there for the industry. I'd meet them in jobs like working for restaurants or bussing tables and stuff like that, and I'd meet people who came to town to like work for the boom, and I was noticing these places that I loved so much, and where I'd go to spend time with my friends or my parents were being leased to these companies, and we're seeing drilling rigs pop up like in the desert outside of Grand Junction, and I was just really I realized like how tied to the industry our area was, and like these places that I thought would be kind of like pristine, in my mind they were pristine, even though later I learned that there's been a long history of industry there on federal lands. But it made me want to explore all that. I was drawn to journalism too because this is a pretty isolated place where I grew up, and I always felt like the news was my tie to the outside world. I was like hungry for big cities where more was going on, where I would meet like a bigger diversity of people. I was always listening to NPR and BBC and like checking the paper first thing in the morning. These were my, tickets outside of this place. So I really wanted to, be part of all that and like be part of everything that was going on out there. And it was just these two like twin passions that in college really merged well. I think with journalism, I don't. I've always believed that somebody should specialize. I think it's a little bit arrogant to think that you could be like an expert in everything and like presume to educate the public about any like the topic of the day. I find that that's how really shallow reporting gets done. And so I had made a really good mentor in college at the University of Missouri. His name is Bill Allen. He was the environment reporter for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch for a long time, like 25 years. And he really showed me that I could make a career like being out in the field, looking at the effect of mankind on the natural world and, the air and water and ecosystems that sustain all life. And I mean, man, like I love doing it. I feel like it's important. There's aspects of what media covers and news priorities that can be a little shallow, can be a little trashy, but I never feel like it is for the stuff that I cover. I feel like it's always important. At worst, it's boring, and we can talk like why it's boring and how not to make it so. It doesn't connect with everyone.
Well, I know it's also emotionally taxing. I mean, I just watch, journalists across kind of the field, and some are able to kind of like keep their focus on just this is my work and that's my personal space or whatever. But for a lot of folks, I mean, they're watching the disentangling of life on the planet. I mean, it's not hyperbolic anymore in any way. So how, and I meant to ask you at the top of the interview, actually, how you are personally, how you are staying safe, if you need anything from the community more broadly. We always open up the comment threads and encourage people to make connections there if they're feeling isolated or whatever. So how are you generally now in the state of crisis that we're in, but also how do you manage kind of the emotional weight of the beat that you're covering?
I appreciate you asking me that, Greg. And I've always liked about you how you really emphasize caring about your neighbors and caring about like other people. And I think that's who I'm doing this work for. I have a really hard time putting journalism together for people who don't care about other people. I've not managed to reach that audience. I don't know how I ever will.
Yeah.
If you care about your neighbors, I'm not sure that like my work is for you. Basically, it's but I'm doing fine. I like the Rivard Report being a digital only publication that handles all of our assignments and editing through WordPress and Slack. We were pretty well adapted to go to work from home for everyone and being kind of physically distanced, but still staying on top of things. So I feel like we were prepared for that part. And I haven't really been out in public too much. I've been doing a lot by phone, just from this apartment. Tuning into the briefings every day, like just doing everything on phone calls. So I would say I've been at low risk. I've really admired the people who can't do that, who work in these essential fields.
Oh, yeah.
And
do you have a favorite mask? I mean, have you gravitated to anything stylish or that particular?
I use a bandana. I should have brought it. I have one bandana with little bugs on it, and then another one that's just more of the traditional back pocket Texas bandana.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I'm just curious. I'm going to start asking people that because you're seeing these, like the clickbait 30, unique masks from around the world or whatever. And
I love the influence on, the COVID fashion is, like we all have bad haircuts and face coverings. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. Let's not go too far into that because next time my face shows up on this broadcast, people are going to be looking and they're going to find something there. But the state of communications, right? I mean, just how do you assess kind of like the journalism as far as like environmental communications, where we are today? Like I was sharing with you before we went on this call that back years ago, climate. I remember early in the mid 90s or so, late 90s, there really wasn't a lot of reporting. I mean, we're reporting about kind of like broadly all these colliding environmental issues. And radioactive waste was a big one for a while in West Texas, at least, and the state. But climate, it seemed like later 90s and the aughts, it really turned on. And yet still 10 years ago or so, I would hear journalists lament. It's like we've never had more information, good information out there for people to be making decisions, lobbying politicians, moving policy forward. And yet we're still stuck in this same space. And we've gone considerably backwards from, I remember when John McCain was running, or Huntsman was running for president, and those kinds of debates among Republicans, very, very different than today. So how is journalism, do you feel like, as a tool to what would you say? What do you think the mission, I guess, how do you see your mission and the state of the industry?
It's there could be in some ways, there's no worse story for an assignment editor than climate, because it's slow moving. It's like sometimes it can seem really imperceptible. There are flashpoints like something like Hurricane Harvey, and then the staggering amount of rainfall that a storm like that drops. But it develops slowly. You look at like long-term average changes. It's hard to find stories, like real human stories, that are easy to tie to climate. I mean, they are definitely tied to climate changes, but drawing those connections takes a lot of scientific work. Even from the side of the reporter, like trying to put all the necessary context and caveats in to say, like, this story about a guy sweating on a rooftop because he's a roofer and it's steadily getting hotter working on roofs in San Antonio just takes a lot of kind of like technical writing ability.
Though you've done that, I think, and you've drawn those lines pretty well in some of your feature writing.
I have tried to do that. That's like what I'm always trying to do. I've interviewed like old people in San Antonio who've grown up here who talk about remembering like when they could easily sleep on the porch at night because it's cool enough at night. I just wouldn't think that that's something you could really do now. And they'll say, like, if you ask people who've lived here for a certain amount of time, like, man, it never used to feel this hot for this long in the summertime.
Yeah.
So I think that there's some kind of like, there's ways where like a normal news story where you're interviewing sort of like a person who's affected by whatever issue you're going to write about at the beginning, who kind of leads you in with an anecdote, like, why does this apply to your life? You kind of zoom out to the experts and the analysis that says, like, why do we care? Why is this important? What do we do? There's sort of there's some of the reactions from some of the decision makers, and you're trying to hold them accountable. That's always like a good section of a news story, and then it kind of goes back out through that story that you introed with. I mean, that kind of archetype of a news story is more difficult to write for climate than like most other news stories, I think. And I think that's why a lot of reporters just aren't up for it.
Do you feel like we've gone beyond like false balance? This was a big issue a decade ago or so. We were still like equal time for different perspectives. I mean, climate deniers, well, that's just as valid in the newsroom that broadly isn't maybe climate literate. And so we're still operating by certain principles. Are we past that? Are we still caught up in that? Is it a continual process of educating the copy desk and the higher level editors?
I don't think any news organization can be quite past that. I think that's a trap they have to work really hard to not fall into, because it's just made for quick hit journalism. It's like, here's an issue. There's, let's try not to offend anyone by making sure that we publish both sides of the issue. Let's make sure that and then give them equal weight as if they have like equal evidence behind them. That works for, I don't know. I mean, I'm not even sure that really works for politics. I mean, usually some side has better points, more evidence-based points than the other, or maybe neither really gets it right. And I don't think that's ever enough for any issue, but I think any news organization could still easily fall into that. It does take somebody, an editor or a reporter with some climate experience, to be able to sift through who is actually a credible source. Like, who should I listen to? I mean, that's a lot of what I'm doing and trying to do is tell people this person is credible. They've published in this field before. Here's how they did their study. Here's how they did their modeling, and this is why you should listen to them.
But do you have any death threats to your credit? Because I know a lot of climate scientists and journalists do get sometimes they're veiled and sometimes not so.
I actually have not experienced as much of that as some of my other climate reporter colleagues.
Yeah.
Maybe part of it is that I'm a man and people are nicer to me on the internet than especially some of the women that I've heard from who will get like really nasty stuff. People don't really pick on me as much that way. But, you know, so I'm happy about that. But I wish that they would, I don't know. I wish people were more open to having their, you know, preconceptions challenged. But I think that's why they get so aggrieved about this and send these nasty grams to people.
Yeah, and I know we can't go too far into kind of what climate denialism is about, but it's obviously I've heard several people talk, you know, say that, oh well, it's really about the solution. It's about the solutions, not about the science, and so therefore all this other stuff gets piled upon. You know, like this is not okay because I don't want to end up in socialism, or I don't want to like have to camp out with dirty hippies or eat lizards or whatever they're afraid of the end point of this is. And unfortunately, the cost of all this will and is heavy. And I think that's what this current moment is kind of displaying in a shorter, like this very like tightened temporal sense, which we don't have, as you were saying, with the climate crisis. It rolls in, you know, in a storm that leaves people in Houston walking through Superfund sites. It's a collision of the event, you know, the warmer waters or the atmosphere holding, you know, water more in heating hotter climates. As well as the built environment, right, and the decisions we've made around development and honestly, who has to stay poor to support the rest of the economy. But one of the things I'm always wondering about, I just had one or two other questions, and I just want to open it to you to share where you are right now.
You mentioned something right there that I think I didn't really address when you were talking about, like, where is climate journalism now and why does it seem like we've made such slow progress? I mean, the disinformation campaign that has accompanied every step of this, from the fossil fuel industry and from big polluters. I mean, I think where it's at right now is like what you described, being focused on how bad the solutions are, and trying to sort people into tribes based on, like, if you believe this climate change stuff, that means you're pro-abortion and you love smoking weed, and you know, it's just to associate it with all this stuff that doesn't really have anything to do with it. Right. That's the focus of the disinformation campaign now. It used to be the scientists are uncertain. We don't know why it's warming so much. But now that the evidence, there's so many people who've worked on the problem for so long and shot down every legitimate possible scientific qualm that it's moved on to being more about, like, well, you don't want to be one of those people who is an alarmist or something like that. And so, I mean, I can't, you know, we can't just blame the media and the public and everything. There's a concerted disinformation campaign run through organizations like the Heartland Institute and all these, like, kind of, you know, fake pseudoscience groups that is still very active. Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder too, oftentimes, like for me, and I find myself doing this, and maybe a lot, but I talk about the climate crisis when what I mean are all of these intersecting ecological crises, which could be the biodiversity collapse, extinction, mass extinction. It could be, you know, the death of the oceans or carbonization of the oceans. It could be just ecological systems being just pollution still, right? Like we used to talk back in the Origin of Earth Day, right? There was very different issues being talked about then. But all this is happening at the same time. And I think oftentimes we talk about it in shorthand. But for me, I'm not talking about a hotter climate necessarily. And I think maybe that's something I need to work on language around, and I don't know if that's something you've thought about as well. There's this boilerplate paragraph I like to put in a lot of my stories. I mean, the most recent one I used it on was about the San Antonio Zoo's efforts to breed endangered cave salamanders. So, I mean, it really can go in a lot of different places. It's about the 5 horsemen of the apocalypse. So I'm screwed up. But, like, habitat loss, pollution, overhunting and fishing, climate change. What is my final one? Oh, crap. I know I forget one. That's right. 4 horsemen is plenty. 4 horsemen is plenty. Yeah. Oh, man. That's going to bother me for a while. But anyway, so this all, exactly what you said, this interconnected, out of balance relationship between mankind and the land, air, water ecosystems, the web of life that sustains all life. I mean, you start zooming out to all this, and you end up sounding a little spiritual, a little earth connected, because it's kind of hard not to. I mean, this is our home. We have thrown our relationship to it out of balance. The way to get back to it, I mean, with everything with coronavirus, I mean, it's really changed my views on how to get back to it, because I really thought that if the entire Earth stopped its economies, if we were all locked down in our homes, if we were all not driving for the most part, if all the economic pain that people are going through right now, I would have thought it would have come with larger reductions in greenhouse gases. I would have thought that would have been something that would, really show us a way out of this, that when we rebuild everything that's falling apart right now, that we could rebuild it to look more or less the same, but better. But we're talking about, I mean, I was looking at recent stories where Rob Jackson from Stanford, like a pretty well-known climate scientist, is saying that in 2020, with everyone on lockdown around the world, with all of us stuck in our homes, we're only supposed to have something like a 5% drop in carbon dioxide for this year. And so, I mean, that shows us it's not us as much as it is like the backbone of our systems. It's power generation, it's refineries, it's industrial sites, it's all the stuff that is deemed an essential service right now that's so heavily carbonized. And I don't know, it's a wake-up call that individual actions won't be enough. I mean, really, we will not. To get to the goals of the Paris Accord, we're supposed to have something like a 7.5% reduction every year.
Right.
So if it took all of this effect on our own lives, on small businesses, on individuals, and to only have a 5%, it shows you that we are not the problem. As much as
I love that. I know we don't have time to drill into this right now, but there's kind of this ongoing, I don't even want to call it a debate, but for me, I really push back on the populationist arguments around this, where, let's just say, a Bangladeshi uses like 20 times less or more of the resources than I mean, there's just great discrepancies and disparities into where the resources are being drawn. But as you point out, like the global, if everybody on the planet was diligently recycling and separating out their aluminum cans and their plastic, if the industrial sector, which is responsible for 85 or 90% of all of that on its own, isn't moved to change, isn't reformed at a deep level, then and it's hopeless, right? And so that's kind of been an ongoing discussion about that personal versus the systemic, issues that we're facing. So I really appreciate that comment. And I guess where we're at, 50th anniversary of Earth Day, like I said, the language has changed. But where do you, I mean, what kind of stories do you see yourself writing in the next year or the next, the year after that, due to this kind of, I mean, it's a huge milestone, a marker, delineation before COVID, post-COVID, I think.
I try to stay on top of things in San Antonio that no one else is going to do. Because I think that's kind of like the best use of the donations that support my work a lot of the time. So I will be looking a lot at what happens with CPS Energy's next bundle of power sources it's going to put online. So, as we've talked about many times, and you're at all the meetings I'm at, CPS is about to do a large new solar project, a pretty sizable new battery project, and then for a long time they were going to just negotiate a contract to buy gas power off the grid behind closed doors with a handful of companies that would have provided that. And thanks to pressure from the mayor and from the environmentalists, it was really, they've backed off of that and are doing more of like a open-ended process to see if they could find something like a firm source of power that might exist instead of gas. So I will continue to follow on that. I'll continue to follow CPS Energy's just transparency overall. I think we've seen progress in that arena over the last year, but where they're going to be at financially with having to raise rates and then how that works in this sort of new environment of expectations where they're going to make that more of a public process than they have before. It's just not something I'll let go by the wayside or forget about. I will be watching oil and gas in Texas. I mean, we saw oil trading at historic lows at negative prices this week. And while that does mean that a lot of the new projects, the big export terminals that people were really anxious about on the Texas Gulf Coast, that might signal the death knell for some of those. I'll still be watching them. And what also can happen during an oil bust is that the frenzy to go out and get as much as possible and produce as much as possible completely goes away. And that means old infrastructure, like old pipelines, plants, wells, tanks, they kind of get abandoned, and they can start to leak and not have that preventative maintenance that constant cash flow can provide. So what I've seen in the past is when there's a contraction of that industry, sometimes like pretty soon after that, you'll see all these reports of pipeline leaks and spills and, the aftermath of everything. And so, I'll definitely be here to follow all that. I encourage people to get in touch with me at brendan@rivardreport.com is the easiest way to, if they have, if they've seen stuff like that happening around San Antonio, including in the rural areas. I mean, these places are news deserts. There's not enough reporters on the job out there keeping track of that stuff. And I'm only as good as my sources. I can't know about that stuff unless somebody like tips me off to it. It's very hard to work through the state regulator system, either the Railroad Commission or TCEQ, to find that information separately. And so I rely on tips.
Okay.
So.
Well, we'll definitely flash up your email on the screen, encourage that. And man, it's just good to catch up with you. It's good to see you healthy and safe. And certainly any other thoughts you have. Otherwise, I just hope we can catch up again. And if we continue doing this broadcast, that I'm sure we will.
Thanks, Greg. I really appreciate you having me on. It's good to see you too. And look for my middle of the night Facebook message with that final horseman. I think
okay, I will for sure. As long as they don't come to visit me, like personally, then it's
exactly,
fine.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Thank you very much. Take care.
Good to see you.
Yeah, Brendan, thank you. And I notice he's here on the comment threads. If y'all have questions for him on his work, I had to shave off the end of that interview a little bit. I'll look for an opportunity to post the full article or the full interview a little bit later. I know Dee Dee was asking about that, and where this conversation went was, into the future, kind of what stories he anticipates covering in the next year, 2 years, as we move through this very, very different kind of landscape that we've known, where people are paying other folks to take oil off their hands, the traders in Wall Street and whatnot. Not used to that. And I want to introduce then Becca Hinojosa. I've got a lot of interest and love for the border, La Frontera, and all the folks who live there, and the animals and the creatures and the river and the waters. Incredible place, incredible folks. And she's just a phenomenal organizer that I have an opportunity from time to time to work with. And just wanted to reach out because I know there's not many people who speak deeply in an intersectional way, that recognize that the land and the people are one, that human rights and the rights of nature are one, that we're bound up in ways that we can't understand, and we obviously can't, that don't value yet broadly in here and now. Okay, just speaking to this culture, to this moment. But we had a great conversation. She's also, I think, coming in on, if folks have questions for her, and I've got a couple of text overlays I need to be sharing, so I may be typing on the fly. But Becca Hinojosa.
Before all this, we were making a lot of our money.
Absolutely wrong. Let's see.
So I'm taking calls from seniors. Before all this, we were making a lot of.
All right. So Alvaro's really anxious to get in, but I'm going to find Becca here manually. I'm going to push some buttons. If you give me just 1 second. Becca is working. Oh, I got an awesome. Okay, well then good. I'll actually play our interview. Anyway. So Becca, I just want to first of all check in, and it's good to see you. It's been a few weeks. It's been since the Expo deal up here, the no border wall border militarization.
Security.
Yeah. Which was awesome, and I was really good to see you there, and good to see so many people taking action on that. But since all this COVID stuff hit, and I just wanted to ask you, first of all, how you are doing, and also, I direct folks a lot into the comments to use them, to just let people know how they are, what they need, and if there's stuff that they can offer to others. So, how are you, and is there anything that you need that the community can offer?
Yeah, thank you so much, Greg, for having me on. I think the Border Security Expo is the last in real life, in person event I was at before we all went into self-isolation, quarantine, physical distancing. So yeah, it was amazing to be a part of that. And I'm calling in from Brownsville, Texas, which is part of the Rio Grande Valley, which first and foremost, that's where I'm from. My family's from. This is my community that I'm a part of and that I fight for on a daily basis. And right now, I mean, we're experiencing COVID-19 full blast, just like everywhere else in the world. And I've been keeping up with local news, and it's I think there's over 1,000 cases of COVID-19 on the Texas border. Just in my county, there's, over 300. In the region, there's, probably 500. And I've been a part of a local mutual aid effort. There's a lot of really amazing mutual aid work going on. And the group's called Red Wing United, and it's I think three border counties. So Webb County, where Laredo is, that's where it got started. And then they reached out to folks in the Rio Grande Valley. And together, we've done over almost 500 deliveries to families, taking them extra needed supplies, taking them bags from the food bank. We've been coordinating with the local food bank. And
a lot of folks may not
donations.
even know the idea of mutual aid. Maybe describe that a little bit. I mean, doing kind of for ourselves within our own community.
Yeah. I mean, essentially what local mutual aid is, that work is when the state fails for the community. And it's when people come together collectively to help people, to help families, to help their own in a way that the state just isn't doing. And so, a lot of people weren't getting the information they needed to keep themselves healthy. They weren't aware of fully what was going on. They needed things like Pampers, baby formula, and all of these laws and ordinances were coming in, and they weren't able to go and get those supplies they needed. So that's where Red Wing United, our local mutual aid effort, stepped up. I was a delivery driver. I was also a supply person. And our leadership is horizontal, so we were all collectively in charge together, and it's been amazing working with community members in that way as
awesome.
This disaster is happening.
Yeah, and I know my thoughts went first to, we had been down fairly recently to Brownsville. We didn't get over to Matamoros, but talking with people who were going back and forth every day, and to the folks who were it's just a makeshift refugee camp essentially, and the concern of where are those people going, and it's just it's just a disaster all the way around. But I don't know, what have you heard in terms of the whether it's detention centers or these camps, these very, very vulnerable, not able to distance obviously, and hygienic supplies and all the rest. So is anything to report from there?
Yeah, so for years, local community leaders in the Valley have been stepping up to support migrants and asylum seekers living in these makeshift refugee camps while they're waiting to get their day in court with the U.S. And that's groups like Angry-Tias and Abuelas, Resource Center Matamoros, community leaders like Gabi Zavala, and they are continuing to do this work. They're demanding the Port Isabel Detention Center release people because of the risk of COVID-19 exposure. These places already have absolutely terrible, monstrous conditions, and it just this added disease it makes everything worse. These are situations that people shouldn't have to be in detention centers at all in the first place.
Right.
So I've heard from Gabby Zavala through social media with Resource Center Matamoros that they've just been in Matamoros this entire time for over a month now that we've been under quarantine. She's been there directly supporting the refugee camp in Matamoros.
Okay. So those are the groups really that folks should be reaching out to if they want to. They're drawn to help in that. The Angry Tias.
And
Abuelas, yeah.
And Resource Center Matamoros.
Okay. Team Brownsville, is that another one?
Yeah, I think Team Brownsville.
Okay. Well, how do you see? So, I mean, there's just it's such a dynamic, it's such an amazing, the land and the water and just everything about the country that you live in down there, and I mean that in the Tierra sense, not in the political geography. The land there is incredible, and I've had really amazing experiences just being there. But there's such obvious hard struggles, these interlocking and intersecting struggles that seem to also inform each other. Like how do you make sense of working around, well, you've got the border wall issues, and then that comes with wildlife and migration issues, when there's human migration issues and the militarization around that, and then there's the Gulf under attack and the export and the LNG, and it's a lot. I mean, what's the narrative that you work with, and how do you respond as an organizer?
Yeah, I mean, we're on the front lines of border militarization, of Gulf Coast, which has been, abused and for resource extraction. We're on the front lines of global climate change. There's just this collision of all these different issues right where we live in our community, which is also, extremely marginalized. We are a people of color, Latinx, indigenous community. And when I say border militarization, we are surrounded by border checkpoints. To come to our community, to leave the community, in many places you go through a checkpoint.
Right.
And then at the same time, there's we're community people here, we're in tune with the land, and border militarization, the border wall, these fracked gas export terminals, the pipelines, that's just severing nature, severing our wildlife spaces. In a way, it's accentuating the border, like a physical constructed border, separating us from the river, where many people here have never even gotten a chance to be in the Rio Grande River, just because we've been so severed by militarization. And that's what the river gives us life. I think when I hear community leaders talk about these different issues, like the Carrizo Comacrudo tribe, the Equal Voice Network in the Rio Grande Valley, we see it, we talk about it in the whole region, how it impacts our entire region, the Rio Grande Valley, where people identify the layers and the interconnectedness of all the different issues, the interconnectedness of the land. And I think that's really important, and we have to do that if we're going to be honest with ourselves about what these issues mean and those impacts.
Well, I know Juan used a term. So Marisol and I did an article recently, and we worked with Juan on it as well, about the camps, the resistance camps that the Comacrudo tribe of Texas uses, right, to stand in opposition to a lot of this work. And I think what he described that land as basically the head of, I think the term he used was the head of the snake, that everything comes here, and if we can beat it there, then everything else kind of can evaporate or something. I mean, it was a deeply anatomical, right, representation of struggle that for me helped kind of imagine where things are out there. But I mean, do you kind of hold that same, it sounds like you're describing sort of the same thing.
Yeah, something a really beautiful part of our region is where the Rio Grande River empties into the Gulf of Mexico. And, my entire life, I've talked to my family members. I've asked if they've been there. Like, I've never been, like, this was my first time this past year was going to where.
Boca Chica? Yeah.
Yeah, out at Boca Chica Beach. And it's like you have to go through a checkpoint, right? Even though you're still in a region and you're not technically in Mexico. You go through a checkpoint to access Boca Chica Beach. Now there's a SpaceX facility there, which is also cutting off access. And then you have to drive down, like if you've got 4x4, then you can drive down the beach, which is like 2 or 3 miles. And that's where you finally get to where the Rio Grande River empties into the Gulf. And it's beautiful. Like there's people in Mexico right on the other side, and you can wave at them, and they wave at you. And it's not very wide either. You could easily like swim across to Mexico or back, and then people are fishing, and like they're there parked in their cars. Yeah, and it's beautiful, magical experience, and it kind of reminds me of the head of there's like a body, right?
Oh, wow. Okay, so actually, yeah, the nature of the river being kind of serpentine and gets more so, right, as it goes to the outfall. That's really interesting too. I thought of something. Is the sable palm? So when I went down on the first rash of border wall construction, 2006, 2007, I traveled down there for the first time for myself, from Santa El Rosario up by El Paso, and just talking with people and everything. And once I got down to that part of the country, I remember learning about or seeing, and I can't remember what park it was, but the sable palms. And it was supposedly like the last big stand of these massive palm trees, like in North America, I guess. Is that? And I should ask, the wall, the just got permission or federal, what do you call it? Able to waive more federal laws to build through which park? I mean, what part of this is something that just happened this last week or so?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple wildlife parks in the valley that would be destroyed or severely impacted by border wall construction. One of them is Benson, out in Mission. There's also the Sable Palm Sanctuary that's already been negatively impacted. Like you drive through, which is what you're describing, the Sable Palm,
right,
which you have to drive past the border wall, over a levee, and then you can access it. But yeah, there's a ton of different wildlife spaces down here facing that direct impact.
Is it do folks in the area? I mean, I know that this is one of those things that depends on where what check mark you use at the polling station, I guess. But the understanding of migration and the history of migration in that area, and that the relatedness of the pulse and the movement of people and all the relations, is there a feeling for that there that maybe is not in deeper into the country, or is it just as difficult there to talk to people about the rights of nature and the rights, human rights, in one sentence?
Yeah, I mean, right now with coronavirus is the first time I think I've ever felt like I couldn't go to Mexico completely, and that's just been really strange. Like, we have a very close partnership, relationship. People here, people come from immigrant families from Mexico or other parts south. The Carrizo Comucudo tribe talk about how their ancestors are along the river on both sides. So we have a strong relationship and deep connection to both sides of the river. And I see that in every family, virtually every family I talk to, my family, and I think I like nature, where we know people maybe don't know the names of every plant or foliage. Other people are still learning, but we can identify when we see something, and we know that's part of the region. Like the Sable Palm Sanctuary, we know sable palms are everywhere. The mesquite, the nopales, the wetlands. People feel that strong connection. to the wildlife landscape of the valley, and that's why our people are fighting so hard to protect it.
What are your thoughts then? I feel like I've read many articles at this point, saying, now that we're bunkered, we have this time to look inward and reassess and organize and like as an opportunity, right, to what comes next or the other side of this. This period, we're going to be riding the COVID roller coaster for a while, I feel like. And I know, like, everybody that I've spoken with, whatever sector, right, what kind of work they've done in the past as organizers and community members, as human beings with hearts and minds and conscience, they're looking at forward, right? And how do we can see the brokenness, we can see this exposing, right, that everything that we knew existed before in terms of the inequities and how whole populations are being made to bear the weight of an unjust system, right? But I also feel like it's a tall order, to be here now, to be responding to the immediate needs and crisis, while also, like, I don't know, there's a lot of idealism that goes into some of the writing that I've been seeing, and yet at the same time, I'm talking and acting and engaging with people in a way that I haven't in my life. One, on levels of intimacy, but also on levels of care and concern for issues that maybe weren't mine before, or I'm carrying issues, kind of like air quotes, that they haven't engaged with before. And it feels like we're all having the same conversation about one issue, which is justice and liberation and kindness. And I don't know if you just, with the time that we have, I'd love to just hear from you in terms of, you're a tremendous organizer, and for those who don't know you, I just want to, like, put that into this space and just say that many people are inspired by you, are encouraged by you, feel empowered because of you, and so I'm really interested just to hear what you've been thinking about and what opportunities you see ahead of us. Because it's hard in the course of the day with everything that's going on. I know my moods and my thoughts bounce around it's like a pinball machine. But I do believe there's something, right? And I think people like you hold something special that for the community, and it'd just be great to hear. So I'll just put my phone down and let you maybe respond to some of that, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Greg. And it's really great to be on here and connect with you in this way during this time. Yeah, I've been valuing every single conversation that I've been able to have. In some ways, like, because of where we're at, like, I've been reaching out to and hearing from people in different ways. And people are just like, are your, like, basic needs being met? Because for a lot of people, before this, their basic needs weren't being met, especially now, their basic needs aren't being met. So it's been interesting to hear what that's like with this pandemic. And yeah, I think, like, there was a tiredness I felt before this, where I would drive around and feel tired from driving around and being so many places. And now there's a tiredness I feel being at home all the time, and just the emotions and the information we're getting on a daily basis is like a different kind of tiring. And I know a lot of people are feeling that. So yeah, it's been interesting. I think, yeah, what I've been seeing with mutual aid, the work that we've been doing down here with mutual aid, is like those existing partnerships and relationships that have always been important are, we're working together in a different way. We're trying to collaborate together in a different way because we have to in this time and place. And I'm also meeting new people, through the cyber universe, and thinking about how we can come together once we can in real life. I think that's really important. And, folks like the Garisoko Magrudo tribe, like, they're still they're putting together an amazing tribunal right now. And it's a tribunal about sacred sites and protecting a sacred indigenous site from the fracked gas export projects in the valley. And that's going to happen next month. And that's going to be a really beautiful space that everyone should come to. And I'm inviting the folks watching this video to keep your eyes out for that tribunal once it's made live. And if you're not aware of what a tribunal is, it's like a series of experts and speakers and presentations over 2 days that look at all the different, social, environmental, indigenous rights, justice impacts that these fracked gas terminals, would have on the Rio Grande Valley and like on climate, on the rights of indigenous people. And, of course, they're talking about how Texas has just been completely stripping away and destroying as much as they can to essentially stop indigenous people. So I think, that's an example of something beautiful I'm seeing coming together during this time. Oh, one last thing. Yep. On Monday was the 10-year anniversary of the BP oil spill. Mm-hmm. And I'm also a part of the Another Gulf is Possible collaborative of Gulf Coast leaders. And Monday was our kickoff to our weekly podcast series featuring different speakers, different episodes about all these different ways that BP oil spill impacted the Gulf region. So awesome. That's another really important thing going on and like date that it just happened. Okay. Yeah, stay safe, stay together. Reach out if you need help.
Yeah, so Becca, thank you again. Thanks so much for taking time with us. I know this was a busy day. I heard that. I'm like texting, catching her attention in the middle of so much going on. Obviously, there's organizers. Earth Day can pull you in a lot of places at once. So really, really appreciate that. And I've just really enjoyed, I think, gotten so much out of just everybody that I've been able to connect with. And I've said it in other broadcasts, that we work with people, we work alongside people. Sometimes we work a little bit on edge against people leaning in the same direction. But it's been in this time that I find myself just like really going deep with folks and having just the most remarkable conversations. And I was having I was just like throwing all this stuff together as we came up to 5:30. So I'm going to give this another shot with Piñata Protest with Alvaro del Norte and Reggie Lopez. And we had a great conversation, and I don't want to shortchange any of that. And I hope that I have the right title slide now.
Before all this, we were making a lot of our money to get by playing shows, and that all fell out like super fast.
Yeah, for sure.
Shows that we had planned for many months, and a couple of tours. But we're doing okay at the moment. I actually myself got a temporary job with HEB, and it's like working phone lines, and that's been fun. That's been a blessing. Mm-hmm. I'm lucky to have that, because honestly, if that wasn't the case, I don't know at least what I would do.
Yeah, for sure. What about you, Reggie?
Pretty much as good as one can be, like in these times. Don't have a job as of yet, but luckily I had some money like saved up, so just been using that. Should have some trend books coming in, but I've been good. It's the first time I've been wearing pants in like maybe a month. So it feels good, man.
Did you do that on our account? I mean, was that the power that deceleration has in the world right now? It's putting people's pants on, or what?
Yeah, I guess it's a good job.
That's awesome. Well, listen, is there anything that in kind of like that you want to offer into the community right now? Where we've got Earth Day going on, 50 years. At the same time, we've got a virus going around that's we've got Bolsonaro in Brazil, open war on indigenous people. We've got refugee camps getting inundated with virus. You've got everything is happening in this country and the reverberations everywhere else. It's a real moment for to reflect and organize for a different world. I don't know if there's something that you would want to send out into the community here in San Antonio.
Yeah, there's so many things going on in this world right now. It's amazing. I think I want to. The one main thing I think that comes to mind with all that is that we're all very connected. All of us, of course, we don't always think about the greater world, but we're all very connected, and the choices that we make here in our own lives, very locally, do affect the grand scheme of things, in the greater world. And I feel that a lot of this stuff that's going on has been boiling for many years, and I think it finally boils over, and we're left with these issues that we're dealing with today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm still trying to wrap my head around a lot of these things that are going on, and I feel like a lot of people are as well. And I feel that in a way it's a really good thing, because it gives people a time to actually reflect and do some honest reflection, because literally people's lives are at risk,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people, we, especially here in the U.S., we've lived very comfortable lives, and for the most part, we haven't really struggled or really felt what it is to need or not have something. And I think it's good, not saying that I'm wishing hurt or death upon anybody, but I think it's a good moment for people to give some honest, serious reflection upon how they live their lives, and hopefully once all this is over, make some serious change for the good. I can't see somebody going through all this and not coming out
Oh yeah.
more great, more so gracious for what they have, and then just more conscious about what they do.
I think it's definitely it's kind of a range of things. I was reading this last night, a very short article, because my attention span right now is pretty short. But this article, they were describing that in these kinds of times, that folks, not only does the depression and anxiety and all these issues elevate and really lock in with folks. So you come out, even when you come out of crisis, you're still kind of formed by that experience in a way. But there's also this invitation. There's always an invitation to recognize what you were saying, which is how connected we all are. And it's there's this I think it's the Kogi in the northeast South America, Colombia area or whatever. Their word for walking and travel and moving is about weaving. They think about weaving. And so when we move in life, we imagine ourselves, it's a good exercise that we're weaving our way through life with each other. And so just because I meet you one day and move on, that's forever. What we've done, there's an interaction and exchange and a binding that happens. And so for all of us, that we don't know what our part is. So people who are I always, put these shouts out, because people who are alone, there's a lot of people that live alone outside of just even this pandemic, but now we're shut up, we can't really go out and get the help maybe that we need. So that's always with us, right? And so I think that's an important thing. If people choose to carry that forward, we can have a real transformative moment out of this.
Yeah.
So do you want to introduce a song or play a little bit for folks? I'm thrilled to have you here. I know people are going to be tuning in for this especially, so I don't want to idle on your time too much.
Yeah, we'll play some stuff. We usually play plugged in, really loud. We don't really play these songs acoustically, but it's it's fun to try something new, and but yeah, we're gonna play some of our stuff. This one is called Vato Perron. 1, 2, 3. A los 5 It's got the second tune. I'm in a game. I have to do you. I am a father. You can't wait to do you. I like to drink. And then fingers at night. Before I see us, are always to the light. Como las hijas del verano Simón. Pero el loco que pone corazón.
All right. Oh yeah. Okay. All right. That's fun.
Start it.
Yeah, sure.
Cruzamos la frontera. Mi amigo me dijo a mí. Esperamos para que sea noche. Luego a cruzar por fin. Alzábamos a los de para empezar una nueva vida. Vamos a dejar este mundo ya no regreso aquí. Mis retos son cuidado y el alcohol. Las muchas para descansar. Mira esa luz que se está, no está. Porque le grito agua. Luego vamos para el norte para empezar una nueva vida. Quédate si quieres, pero ya porque ya me voy a ir. Ya me voy a ir. Ya me voy a ir. That's a good place to stop.
Yeah, that's nice. That's
It's a
nice.
very long song.
You want to talk about that song a little bit, about the message of that song?
Yeah, that song is called Al rato cruzamos la frontera, and it's a fictional story about two individuals trying to cross the border. We have family. We still have family that is living the immigrant life, and we grew up that way, ourselves too, and so we're always very moved by that and the struggles of being illegal and having to hide from the media and everything. So that song is about it's a fictional tale about it, but there's a lot of truth in it as well, and a lot of metaphor to that experience. I think one interesting thing about all this staying at home, is that it's kind of like it feels, and I saw this online, somebody mentioned it, and it's so true. Like it feels like when you're growing up and you can't go anywhere, you can't really go out because you're afraid of being picked up by the media, by immigration, by ICE and stuff. I grew up like with that kind of experience, and it's very stressful. It's very, very stressful, and I And I don't know if people like wonder or consider that. This is, isn't it, in a way, it's a little bit like kind of like living that experience as well. You can't even go outside your own country. Um, you know, Finding work may be difficult. You know, and you're in a ways like afraid to interact with other people.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
No,
a
for real.
simulator.
Yeah, for real. When I talked with Siba Ali, Exi, not very long ago, a couple weeks ago, we talked about that in this thing like where there's whole populations of people that are trained to try to be invisible, right? And so this experience right now is not new, but it's a lot of other people trying to hopefully becoming acquainted with that reality. But yeah, her cousin, just lost his legs on the bestia and the whole thing, So we're raising money over there, and but for San Antonio, we need to do better. We need to do better here and around the country, obviously. So maybe this is a time like there's movements to release juveniles from detention, for jail, and ICE facilities, especially right now, because that's where the virus lives. And in these places where people can't get away, and they can't socially distance, and they don't have supplies or soap, or they're not given medical care. So that message has to get out.
Oh yeah, yeah. That when this stuff was going around, that was like my first thought was, the people in detention centers, either with ICE or people even just locked up in prison, because wow, like that's like the perfect breeding ground for this virus to spread.
Mm-hmm.
You want to volver?
Yeah. Classic style.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, let's do classic style. You want to do it?
Sure.
You want to get it bajo? You want me to do it?
Yeah, I can bring out the bajo.
All right, you guys bring
Awesome.
it bajo.
Yeah, bring it.
Make it a little more sense. Ese amor apasionado anda todo alborotado por volver. Me camino la locura, aunque todo me tortura. Sé que nos dejamos hace tiempo, pero llegó el momento de perder. Tú tenías mucha razón, la casual corazón, y me muero por volver. Y volver a tu brazos otra vez. Llegaré a donde estés, no se pierde, no se pierde. Quiero volver. San Antonio classic, right there.
And it's a pretty like good song, because I think we all want to get back together soon.
Yeah.
Volver.
Yeah. Crazy times, man.
Mm-hmm.
These are crazy times.
Hey everybody, this is Marisol. I'm the co-editor of Deceleration, and I wanted to tell you about an upcoming event that Deceleration is co-sponsoring with Mitchell Lake Audubon Center and Stone in the Stream, Roca en el Rio, environmental writer and artist group. It's called Words for Birds, and it's the 12th annual Words for Birds to be held in San Antonio. Normally, it's held every year at Mitchell Lake Audubon Center on the far south side, a little bit south of Texas A&M, San Antonio. And normally, what we do is we do a workshop out there at the ponds, which it's actually a really interesting site because it's the former sludge ponds for the city. So until the 1980s, the city sent all of its sewage sludge there to these holding ponds, and then since that time, Audubon Center has administered it and kind of cleaned it up and turned it into this really cool outdoor urban nature preserve, which attracts lots of birds because birds love sewage. So Words for Birds has been held there since 2008, and about a year ago, the main organizer, Moby Warren, decided she was going to step back from that effort of organizing Words for Birds every year, and she handed it down to me. So I've inherited Words for Birds, and I thought it would be a great event for Deceleration to take part in. But of course, this is the year that a lot of events around town have been canceled because of the coronavirus pandemic. Pretty much the whole calendar for National Poetry Month kind of got evaporated, and with some events moving online. And we did talk about doing an online event, an online Words for Birds event, but it kind of couldn't figure out quite how that would make sense since it is so location specific. It is so much a part about being there outside at Mitchell Lake. And so the idea came up from one of the poets that had already signed up to read, well, why don't we do an ebook? Why don't we do some kind of online publication? And so from there, the idea kind of snowballed. And so this year's Words for Birds is going to be, instead of a workshop followed by a reading, it's going to be a digital zine, which we will be publishing to Deceleration. We'll make that link available when it's up. And then there still will be a workshop component, and that part will be online, which you can participate in by contacting Mitchell Lake Audubon Center, and we'll put that email address up on the screen for where you can RSVP, and then they will send you the Zoom invitation link. So both the zine release and the workshop are going to be taking place on next Thursday, April 30th, the last day of National Poetry Month. The workshop is going to be from 6 to 7 p.m. And the concept for the workshop, I think the title is Writing at the Edges of Nature, Culture, and Justice. So look for that. It would be great if you could participate with us. And, it makes to me like a really kind of deep sense that instead of an online reading, we would do a chapbook or a zine that lives online in part, because, if you think about it, like, what is a book really other than kind of the original virtual event, so when bodies can't gather together in real time and space, words can still gather on the page, and so that's kind of the spirit that we're offering that to the community. Let's see. This year's zine is going to include the work of 13 poets who are writing about a wide range of birds. And to give you just a little sampling of some of the work that's going to be included in that zine, we want to roll an excerpt from an interview we did with Jim LaVilla Haviland, who was one of the founders of Words for Birds and continued to be, since then, one of the main organizers of the event. And he's featured in the zine as well. So we're going to see a little clip from an audio interview we did with him, and the full interview will be available as a podcast on Deceleration, probably around the same time that we put everything up for the zine, towards the end of the month, but we'll make that link available to folks. Here is poet Jim Haviland. He'll be talking a little bit about why Words for Birds, and not words for rivers or words for trees. What is it about birds that is so compelling that we recognize it in this event? And he'll also read some of his work. So enjoy.
I actually think that birds allow for an analogy with poets. That there's an there's a relationship there. And in fact, some of the great bird poems, To a Skylark, for example, some of the great bird poems are about the desire of people to break earth bonds, to fly, to soar. And then, of course, there's Daedalus and the issues with that. But I think all of those things have a bearing on why there are these poems. And they range. The intriguing thing, of course, is that they range across all cultures. You know, I mean, there are bird-related folk tales in Zora Neale Hurston. There are bird-related folk tales in Inuit traditions and in African traditions and in Asian. I mean, it's pretty universal. And I guess my sense is that it really is something about what it feels inside us to see something get off the ground.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to pose the same question to myself because I know, like, my own writing is so often filled with birds. I think there's something about observation there. Maybe they make you look at them and they make you study them, and when you study something, when you look at something and you watch something for a long time, you just kind of naturally want to write about it, I feel like.
I think, in fact, that what birds allow us to do is to kind of come up with a working method for observing anything in the world. So if you focus closely, you can look at insects. If you broaden focus, you can look at cows, elephants, or giraffes. But birds, given how prevalent, given how we see them all the time, given how we hear them as well, and given their variety, give us the chance to refine those observation skills.
Yeah, they're definitely always all around us, so they're really common, but then if you actually really pay attention and watch them, like, you're surprised at how different they are, and you're struck by just how like strange they are and how strange we are. That's my feeling when I look at birds. Well, Jim, would you I don't know if you have any of your poems in front of you, but can we close with any of the poems that you had submitted to this year's Words for Birds, which will be, instead of a live event, a live reading, will be a zine, a chapbook, a collection of the work that the poets would have read?
Which is such a lovely idea, and is one way to keep this alive. It's called Kinetic Identity. And actually, I would say, in reference to our conversation, that in fact, much of these days, my observing, and it may in part be affected by Thoreau, is a little attention deficit mode. It switches from one thing to another thing, in part because that's what the world is like. So this is kinetic identity. Does the lively, chasing, running, whirling, high-tailed movement of the squirrels, which we are apt to label frolic, romp, signify nothing more than just the way they move. As bobwhites bob and snakes slither, they move the way they're built to move. After all, we know, for all her wide-eyed, inquisitive, neck-turning, the owl is not really asking who.
So I'm taking calls from seniors, and I take their order down, and then I pass it on to a runner who actually does the shopping at HEB, because a lot of these people, they have compromised immune system, so they can't go out, and also maybe they have transportation issues. So yeah, the groceries get picked up and delivered to their houses, and I get calls from all over Texas, and it gives you like a scope of what's going on, like this inside scoop, And sometimes I'll spend a few minutes talking to these people, and they'll tell me like how worried they are and how thankful they are for this service, and it's really eye opening, It really kind of like brings it home like even deeper. And I enjoy it. It's fun. I feel like I'm doing a good service for these people, and that I'm glad for it. I'm grateful to be doing it. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have a really good tone when you're on the phone. I've noticed you have a really good way of talking to people.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I try to be friendly and calm with them. Because a lot of people are afraid, and they like people are like they're like. I have nobody else. I have no family. I have no friends that can deliver and food. I know what I'm gonna do, and it's cool. It's like at least one little way of helping during this time.
Yeah.
And it's cool, and I get called mijo and mijito. And that's sweet.
Your family just got that much bigger, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm really, I know in here in San Antonio and many other places that you guys are held really close to and really cared for. And I don't know how many murals that you have, Reggie, around town, but I'm sure just as many as this guy. I just am not driving on those streets yet. But listen, I just want to make sure. I know people will be happy to see you're safe and doing well, and appreciate you so much.
Yeah, well, we're hanging in here, and we hope everybody's being safe out there.
Mm-hmm.
And listen to those doctors and scientists. All we can do is just take their advice, and hopefully we get through this sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
We miss. I miss playing music. I miss being able to go out. But the sooner that the better that we follow these orders, the sooner we'll get through this.
Yeah. So the closing out, thank y'all for those who hung out, that spent time with us for a little Earth Day check-in conversation. It's pretty much, these are the kinds of conversations we're having almost every day over here. But it's really appreciated, and just know that you are someone that we want to know, and that we're doing this work because we want folks to find each other and to find space where they feel held and known when things are falling apart in the way they have. So I will just make a note, there's a screening tonight. A friend of mine worked on this incredible documentary. I'm just like busting up a little description here. When you leave this broadcast, check out the Condor and the Eagle documentary. It's a kind of donation sliding scale deal. I'm putting the links in on the comments. I think I am. Yeah, so check, there are links over here to RSVP and find your way over there. We're just closing out. I've got to close off by 1:30 to keep this stream up on Facebook. There's a lot going on in the city I want to get into, but it's going to have to wait for the next broadcast. Thanks for your patience. I wanted things to move more smoothly, but they moved the way they needed to move. And for everyone who joined us here, and a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect.